Hi, welcome back to E3D Designs. Today, we're going to install the X-axis belt on our carriage, and we're going to tie up any loose ends on the X and Y axis motion assembly. So let's get started. Alright, so for this part of the upgrade, you're going to need your X-axis belt. You're going to need your X-axis pulley, as well as a pair of ME63ZZ bearings. You're going to need the revised version of the X-axis tensioner, which will allow you to use those bearings. You're going to need the spring from the X-axis tensioner. You're going to need a metric 3 by 12 millimeter screw, and you're going to need a belt clamp. And we're also going to need the hot end carriage out of the printer, so we're going to pull that out real quick so we can mount our belt to it. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is remove the cap and unplug the connector. So we'll take these two screws loose here on the top of the carriage. Remove our cap, set it aside, and then just unplug this connector. Now our carriage is ready to be removed. Now what I have to do is take out these two screws here on the side carriage. Pull off this one piece of the Y carriage, set it down, and now we can slide our whole hot end carriage right back out of the printer. Alright, so next thing we need to do is we need to take our X-axis belt and we need to cut it. Yes, I know, we're going to cut a perfectly good belt, but you're going to get a pair of wire cutters right in between two ribs. Go ahead and cut it so it's one long piece. Now I've got plenty of belts lying around, so I've already cut one. And then the next thing you do is the bolt's going to take up a little bit of space, so we want to go ahead and trim off two teeth. Alright, so when you're done, you're going to have a little tiny piece like that with just two ribs on it. And get rid of that. Now, right here, if you remember, we put a heat set on the top side of the carriage. We're going to go ahead and take our 12 millimeter screw, put it through our clamp, feed it into the hole right there, and put a few turns to get it started in the threads. And we're going to take our belt and slide it till it butts up against, I don't know if you can really see it, but you're going to slide it till it butts up against the screw. And do the same thing on the other side. I think in my design I might have this bolt hole a little too far towards the front, to try and set your belt back to the back side of the clamp, and then just tighten up your clamp. And now we've installed the belt onto our carriage. You can go ahead and grab your ME63ZZ bearings and snap them onto the axle on your pulley here. And I'll be ready to install that with the tensioner and the spring in the next step. Alright, so we need to go ahead and put our carriage back in. So we're going to go ahead and slide it back over our rods here. Put our end cap back in place. Now this time we want to go ahead and put it back in the correct way, so we need to get our bearings in place for it, or our bushings I guess I should say. And we're going to go ahead and snap it back in place. And put the 2 screws back in. And we can go ahead and plug our harness back in. And put the cap back on. Alright, and the last thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and put this belt back into the clamps on this carriage. Easiest way to do that is to ground the whole thing forward against the front rod here and lock in part of our belt. Now that it's lined up with the rest, we can go ahead and pull that out and tuck in the other parts of the belt into the clamp. And that part of the carriage is now set up, moving nice and neat. Now we need to go ahead and put the belt back on the tensioner and on the stepper. We're going to move to this side, and I'm going to switch camera views for just a moment. So next thing we need to do is we need to get one end of our belt back in around the stepper. I'm going to stick it back as far as I can get it in there, and usually it's going to hang up on the edge of the pulley. If it does, just need to use a flathead screwdriver to push it back there a little bit and then slide it over, and that part's in. Now we'll go ahead and put the tensioner in on the other side. Okay, so next step, we need to go ahead and mount our new tensioner assembly. We need to go ahead and put the spring back in it. Just go ahead and push it in on the little button inside there till it kind of snaps in place. Now with the grooves up, you're going to slide it right here into the Y carriage. And that's how it's supposed to go in there. Now we'll go ahead and load the pulley and the belt into it. Alright, so now you want to take your carriage, push it as far as you can over towards the stepper so you get as much belt to work with. Take your pulley, stick it inside, kind of pinch it like this, push your tensioner all the way in, and get your pulley where it's riding right on top of it, and just tuck it down in, and then it lines up nice and tight. Only thing left to do is put the set screw back here on the tensioner, and you're done. Alright, so the last thing we do is we need to dig out one of our DaVinci metric 3x8mm thread cutting screws, and we're going to go ahead and insert it right in the hole here in the side of our Y carriage, and that'll line right up with a hole in our tensioner here, and we'll just snug that up nice and tight. And that is the completion of the assembly of the X and Y carriage and their belts. Alright, so that wraps up all of our modifications to the X and Y axis motion assembly. In our next episode, we're going to go ahead and clean up the wiring harness a little bit, plug in any connections we might have missed, and then we're going to go ahead and install the extension brackets and the brace for our 200 by 200 print bed modification. So homework for next week, print your brackets and brace. And remember, if you like what we're doing here, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for updates, and if you want to help support the channel out, I have a wish list and PayPal link right down there in the description. And remember, if it ain't broke, upgrade it. We'll see you next time.